Hi everyone, so today for math we're going to be starting on page 281 and this is 8.3 and we're going to discuss measuring angles in a circle. So for starters, you can show all the different types of angles in a circle. Here we can see an acute angle, and we know that an acute angle has a measure that is greater than 0 degrees and less than 90 degrees. So this is an acute angle. It's greater than 0 and it's less than 90 degrees. So any angle that falls in here, that falls in less than 90 degrees, is going to be acute. For a right angle, we know a right angle has a measure of exactly 90 degrees. And we know that a circle can be divided into 4 right angles. So we could really divide this into fourths, and each of these would be 90 degrees. We also represent a right angle with this little square right here. An obtuse angle, we know that an obtuse angle has a measure that is greater than 90 degrees and less than 180 degrees. So the greatest obtuse angle we can have would be 179 degrees, because once it becomes 180 degrees, it's going to be a straight angle. So a straight angle has a measure of 180 degrees. It's exactly half of a circle. And we know that a full circle is 360 degrees. So whenever we see a straight angle, we know that it's going to be 180 degrees. And this one is probably a new term. So a reflex angle is an angle that is greater than 180 degrees. So it's greater than a straight angle, but it's less than 360 degrees. So this angle is a reflex angle. And here again, we can see that a circle is 360 degrees. So if we had this angle here, it would have to go all the way around to be 360 degrees. So for page 282, we're going to go over drawing angles in a circle. So if you do have a protractor or the cutout of it, you could grab that for this, but if not, that's okay. So our first one is the obtuse angle, and again, we know that's larger than 90 degrees and smaller than 180 degrees. So I'm just going to make one like this. And then when I measure it, I'm going to start at one ray, and then I'm going to go to the other. I know this is obtuse, so I know I'm using these numbers, these larger numbers, and I can see that this is about 150 degrees. So I'm going to write 150 degrees. A straight angle we know is a straight line, and it cuts the circle in half because a whole circle is 360 degrees, and half a circle is 180 degrees. So this one's 180 degrees. Next, we have an acute angle. We know that's going to be smaller than 90 degrees. So I'm going to make one ray like this, and then like this. And then I'm going to measure. So I'm going to make sure my 0 is lined up with one ray, and then I'm going to look with the other. And I'm going to make this a little longer. I can see that this is at 50 degrees, and since it's acute, we're using the smaller numbers. We're using this row, so I can see that it's at 50 degrees. So now for number 4, 3 angles with a sum of 360 degrees. So again, there's many different possibilities that we can do for this, but I'm just going to start with, I'm going to make a right angle. So I'm going to draw my right angle, and I know this is 90 degrees, but I can prove that as well. If I look at my protractor, I can see that this is 90 degrees. And then I'm going to try to make a 45 degree angle. So I know that 45 degrees is less than half of 90. So I'm going to guess it's going to be right about here. And I can measure that to make sure. I can see that that's, yep, that's right about 45 degrees. So here's 45 degrees. So now for this angle, we know that this angle is going to be larger than 180 degrees because it's larger than a straight angle. It's going farther than that. So we know this is a reflex angle. And what we can do is take these two angles. So we can take 90 and 45 and add them up. So 90 plus 45 equals 135. So we know that right now we have 135 degrees. But total, our sum is 360 degrees. So we can find the difference. So we can subtract 360 minus 135. So we're subtracting these two angles. So we know we need to borrow, make that a 10. This becomes a 5. 5 minus 3 we know is 2. And we know 3 minus 1 is 2. So now that's 225. So this angle is going to become 225 degrees. So now 225 degrees plus 90 degrees plus 45 degrees equals 360 degrees. So for number 5, write out the sum of your angle measurements in exercise 4 to show that it equals 360 degrees. So that's what we just did. So you would write 90 degrees plus 45 degrees plus 225 degrees equals 360 degrees. Okay, so now we're going to quickly go over page 283. So it says discuss angles of a triangle. So the prefix tri means 3. So it is easy to remember that a triangle has 3 angles. Triangles can take their names from the kind of angles that they have. So a right triangle has one right angle, which we show by drawing a small square at the right angle. So we know that this is a right, this means it's a right angle, so this is a right triangle. An obtuse triangle has one obtuse angle. So when we look at this triangle, you can see here that we have an obtuse angle. We can see that these two angles are acute angles. So when a triangle has one obtuse angle, we know that it's an obtuse triangle. And for an acute triangle, it has 3 acute angles. So here we can see that we have 3 acute angles, which makes it an acute triangle. So a right angle has one right angle, obtuse triangle has one obtuse angle, and an acute triangle has 3 acute angles. So now for number 1, you can also use letters to write and talk about triangles. This triangle is triangle QRS. Name its 3 angles and their type. So for starters, we know this is a right angle. So we could name this. So we could say angle QRS is a right triangle. So angle QRS is right. You could also say SRQ. Angle SRQ is right. Okay, so next we see that we have an acute angle. If we look right here, we can see this is an acute angle. So we could say angle RQS is acute. Or you could say SQR. And now we have one more angle. We have this angle right here. And we can see that, again, this is an acute angle. So we can name this QSR. So angle QSR is acute. You could also say RSQ as long as you're keeping your vertex in the middle. So what kind of triangle is triangle QRS? How do you know? We know that this is a right triangle because it has a right angle. And whenever there's a right angle in a triangle, it's going to be a right triangle. So we can write right triangle. And we could write, it has one right angle. Okay, and we know that because of this small square through angle QRS. We know that this is a right angle, so this is a right triangle. So now for number 3, draw and label a right triangle, an acute triangle, and an obtuse triangle. So we can draw a right triangle. We know is going to look like this. It's going to have a right angle. We put our little square right there. So this is a right triangle. And then we need an acute triangle. So remember, an acute triangle needs to have 3 acute angles. So this would be an acute triangle. And then lastly, an obtuse triangle we know needs 1 obtuse angle. So I'm going to make this like this because you can see this is an obtuse angle. These would be acute angles. So since this has 1 obtuse angle, it's an obtuse triangle. We're going to go on to page 284, and we're going to be identifying angles of a triangle. So we're going to name each triangle by its angles and explain our thinking. So for this angle, we can see that we have 3 acute angles, which makes this an acute triangle. So in this first line, we're going to write acute triangle. And on the second line, we're going to write it's because it has 3 acute angles. So we're going to write 3 acute angles. For number 5, we can see that we have a right angle right here. And when we have a right angle, we know that this is going to be a right triangle. So right triangle, and that's because it's 1 right angle. And then for number 6, you can see that again we have 3 acute angles. So that makes this an acute triangle. Because we have 3 acute angles. So for number 7, we can see that here we have an obtuse angle. And when we have 1 obtuse angle, it makes this an obtuse triangle. So this is an obtuse triangle because we have 1 obtuse angle. For number 8, we can see here we have a right angle, so we know it's going to be, again, a right triangle. So we have a right triangle because we have 1 right angle. Okay, for this one, we can see that we have this obtuse angle right here. We can see here we have 2 acute angles, but this 1 obtuse angle makes this an obtuse triangle. So let's write obtuse triangle, and we have, 1 obtuse angle. Okay, and then for this one, we're going to look, we can see that we have 3 acute angles. So this is going to be an acute triangle. Because we have 3 acute angles. Okay, for this one, we can see here we have an obtuse angle. So we know this is going to be an obtuse triangle. And these 2 are acute angles, but we have this 1 obtuse angle, which makes this an obtuse triangle. So 1 obtuse angle. Okay, so for numbers 12 through 15, I'll let you do those ones on your own. But for number 16, describe how angles make triangles different from one another. So one thing that we can note is that the greater the size of an angle, the longer the opposite side is. So like if we look at this obtuse triangle, we can see that the greater the size of the angle, the longer the opposite side is. So we can see that this is the longest side and it's across from the largest angle. We do have these two little acute angles in here, but we can see that this side is a lot smaller. Both of these sides are a lot smaller. So one thing we can write is the greater the size of an angle, the longer the opposite side. Additionally, so the smaller the angle, the shorter the opposite side is. So if we look, again, if we just look at this one even, the smaller the angle, the smaller the opposite side is going to be. So like for this one, these are all acute angles, but this is our smallest angle, and we can see that this is the smallest side. So the smaller the angle, the shorter the opposite side. Sorry, I'm running out of room. Okay, so once you have all this done, again, you can finish these, and then there is a Google form for you to fill out that's going to have some questions that are similar to these ones. So be sure to use your book, use all your new notes that you just took. Thank you.